Good afternoon, good afternoon, folks. Second try. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We're going to that horrible world known as the JRC, but before we do, the usual disclaimers. If you are unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you're going to find all the pertinent links right there in the description box. Please, in particular, take note of the article written by NeuroClastic, a small non for profit started by autistics for autistics. In it, they interviewed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so called behavior modification program. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read that article so much. They threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic refused. You know the drill, folks. Please read the article. Share it on all your social media. Also included in there is NeuroClastic's public statement regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding just in case the JRC actually does see through with their threat. Trigger warning 1. When we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips or surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please use your headphones. Trigger warning 2. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously, parental supervision is advised. So, where we left off yesterday, we talked about in regards to dosage and whether or not that had influence of whether you could directly say that the GED does pose a threat in regards to causing PTSD and the obnoxious arguments that the JRC tried to argue to prove that it doesn't. Fact of the matter is, if you get tortured with a particular implement, you're going to have a phobia of that implement. You've been through some traumatic shit, you're going to get PTSD. I don't make the rules, folks. We've seen the pattern repeat itself enough times that we can acknowledge the fact that when you torture and torment someone with a device like that, you can actually say that the person going through that is definitely possibly going to be developing PTSD later. This isn't rocket science, all right? But let's move on to where we were last. We agree with the commenter and the authors that the dose response relationship between the severity of the trauma and the stress disorder is weak, meaning that the severity of the symptoms or resulting disorder may not correspond with the severity of the trauma. Let me put this in layman's terms for you folks. Whether you think the particular abuse is heinous or not, the very threat of violence in and of itself can cause post traumatic stress disorder. And we've got numerous studies to back that fact up. So it doesn't matter on the physical plane of existence how that has impacted us physically. Okay? The threat of violence itself and living constantly under the threat of that violence is more than likely going to develop into PTSD later on. To try to argue anything contrary is insane. To try to sit there and literally tell these folks that these kids were not caused enough pain, physical pain, to call it PTSD makes you a goddamn monster. There should be no pain in regards to treatment. Period. Okay? It is sad that we have to argue the fact that the very threat, that sense of Damocles' sword forever perched just right above your neck, Yeah, folks. Having been a person that's lived through that, as well as the physical violence being visited upon me when I was a kid, because stepbrother, I can tell you how hard he hit me didn't matter. The fact that I lived in a never ending state of absolute terror for a good decade of my life, you're gonna bet I developed PTSD, okay? The authors also find that the people exhibited the full symptomology of PTSD, even if the trauma that caused the symptoms did not satisfy the then current pre DSM 5 criterion A. As understanding develops, so do diagnostics. These things evolve. This is something that the JRC continues to hurl itself against. The fact of the idea that medicine, and particular in regards to mental health, evolves as more new information comes in and better studies are done. That's how medicine continues to evolve and develop and get better and better. But we're not dealing with rational people here. So let's continue to read, shall we? While the comment agrees with these authors and the FDA that there is a weak or non existent dose response relationship, it misunderstands the implication of this, which is that the severe symptoms may manifest even if the trauma is not severe. And I want to say this as someone who's have survived abuse, and I'm going to say it with my whole chest. Who the fuck do you think you are that you can sit there and judge in regards to a child's torment, whether it is current or past, and be able to pass judgment on whether or not I have developed mental health issues from it? Who in the hell do you think you are? Okay? Because whether someone develops PTSD or not, more than not, has absolutely nothing to do in regards to the so-called quote unquote physicality, how bad the abuse was. What torments you into your later years, even as an adult, is that never ending fear, that constant years under threat that follows you. And you never get rid of it entirely. You learn how to deal with it, you learn how to reason with yourself, but it's still there, folks. All right? I speak of experience when I talk about this. You do not get to tell survivors how severe their abuse was, nor do you get to tell them that what they went through wasn't enough for them to later on develop mental health issues that were caused by it. And you are a special level scumbag if you do. Okay? But they use this particular way of talking for a point and a reason, folks. These are the smooth overs. Oh, it's not as bad as what you were saying. Oh, but it didn't cause you that much physical harm. It's the same excuses we've all heard about famous child abuse cases, especially child abuse SA cases. All right? You do not get to tell me that the horrific hellscape of a childhood that I went through, and many of us have gone through, wasn't severe enough to say that it led to mental health issues later on. You don't get to judge that. Nor do you get to judge the psychological absolute carnage that is wreaked when you live that many years with that threat hanging over you. Okay? And guess what? It doesn't matter whether it was something that went on for several years, like myself, or whether it was simply a one time incident. It still follows you. And to try to deny that, to say, but they weren't being abused enough in order to merit to say that they have PTSD, go fuck yourself. Yes, I'm throwing F bombs around, but this is absolutely just. If you never lived through it, you really don't, I believe, really have a good understanding of it. But for those of us who do, we know and can tell you that simply the threat of that violence that had already been visited upon us could be visited upon us at any time. That fear, that hyper aware alertness, yeah, there's going to be a psychological toll to all that. And as always, when regards to things like this and parents, you parents who continue to drink the Kool-Aid and not even care about any of the massive red flags the JRC has waved over the last 3 decades of its existence. Yeah, you can't sit there and say, but obviously my child wasn't that hurt because look at the video and that was barely a cringe. The whole point of why you sent this kid to this school is because you don't understand them and you don't want to take the effort to try to put the work in so that your kid can receive proper treatment and interventions. I don't want to hear it. All right? I don't want to hear you making excuses for these abusive bastards because you don't want to be a parent. I don't. I got no time for it. None. And I've got no sympathy. Zilch. In regards to the JRC, this is one situation where you have every single piece and scrap of evidence under God to tell you that this place is a horror show. If you continue to consent to send your kid to that place with all the facts and evidence that you have seen, especially the court documents from California, then I don't know what to tell you. But they do this because it is an argument that has worked in the past, folks, in regards to kids who have gone through some horrific shit. And if they wanted to sue places like the JRC, it very much is the scenario of we didn't hit you hard enough for you to have psychological trauma. That's essentially what it's saying. What I'm here to tell you is it doesn't matter how hard I was hit. It was living in that constant, never ending state of constant vigilance and fear. Okay, and it hangs around and it haunts my ass to this very day. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and close out on that. A little bit more personal than I had intended to do with this particular video. So we're going to go ahead and go here. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time, folks. So please, if you could, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to utilize those comments. As always, folks, I appreciate your time. And hold up. And as always, we'll see you next time. I hope you have a good one. Bye bye, everyone.